Well, here we go again. A new wave of coronavirus terror has begun, accompanied by hysterics in the media. The first one, as we know, took place in the spring and is still fresh in everyone's memory. Once again, we see people in plague gowns posing against a background of urban architecture all over the media. Once again, we are getting reports containing mysterious numbers of people who, according to a pseudoscientific PCR test, have been infected. Once again, we are required to wear completely useless masks, which cannot filter out neither a respiratory virus nor even construction dust, and which were never intended for either. The media are broadcasting tons and tons of this, continuing to fool the peoples of the world. Along with the brainwashing of the population, political terror is also growing. Prohibitions, fines, forcible placement in detention centers, restriction of democratic rights and freedoms of citizens. But the dying bourgeoisie class will not be able to go on with this big stick policy and total deception for long. People are not as stupid as capitalists believe. They are able to distinguish reality from illusion, and so they resist, not wanting to be the puppets of the powers that be. After all, if they don't resist the fascist terror now, if they don't fight for their democratic, civil, and simply human rights, soon they won't have a chance to take a single step or breath freely. The struggle against corona-fascism is unfolding all over the world. Great Britain, France, Germany, Spain, Czech Republic, and Slovakia. Russia slowly begins to shift as well. Here are some recent examples. Czech Republic. On October 18th, in the center of Prague, thousands of people protested against the quarantine measures of the authorities. Initiators of the most active protests were young people, soccer and hockey fans, who then were joined by other Czech workers. There were fierce confrontations with the police. The protest was caused by the anti-corona measures which had been introduced in the Czech Republic, namely the closure of Czech galleries and museums, castles, palaces, and all similar monuments and cultural centers, observatories and planetariums. The ban on fairs, circus performances and variety shows, conventions and symposiums. All sporting events, both amateur and professional, have been abolished. Matching and training at indoor sports facilities is now prohibited. Only 20 people can now participate in open-air sports events in the Czech Republic. All children's after-school and sports clubs in the country have been shut down. A combined system of education has been introduced for secondary school students. Classes are divided in two groups, which attend classes in turns. It is forbidden to visit hospitals, nursing homes, and other social institutions. Public institutions, civil registry offices, municipalities, etc., are open only 2 days a week for 5 hours. Starting from October 21st, mandatory mask wearing for all outside spaces, including inside your own car, has been enforced. Furthermore, the Czech Prime Minister stated that he didn't rule out the possibility of introducing a full lockdown, that is, mass closure of educational, state, trade and entertainment institutions. Because of the epidemic, they say. And if it doesn't help, how on earth would any of these measures help anything? Then additional restrictions will be introduced in the country. Obviously, Czech people could not tolerate this lawlessness, remembering the previous bitter experience in the spring. No, not all of them came out yet, but young people came out, and this is the most important thing. After all, the future belongs to them. Slovakia. On October 17th, in the capital of Slovakia, Bratislava, mass demonstrations against quarantine measures took place. Gyms, swimming pools, and fitness centers have been shut down in the Republic due to the growing number of coronavirus cases. Schools have switched to remote learning. It is forbidden to gather in groups of more than 6 people. Thousands of protesters most of them young people, came to the Slovakian government building and demanded an explanation from Prime Minister Matović. Of course, no one went out to them. On the contrary, the police tried to disperse all those people dissatisfied with the government's actions with tear gas and water cannons. The people declared that the protests shall go on. As the previous spring experience clearly shows, the only thing that the elusive and undefined disease COVID-19 is afraid of are the multi-thousand protests. Great Britain. On October 17th, several thousand people protesting against coronavirus restrictions marched through Oxford Street in the centre of London. Shortly before that, the city authorities had announced the second highest level of alert in the city due to the growing number of cases. The city dwellers had been prohibited to meet outside their homes with anyone who was not a part of their family or close relatives and friends. It is also prohibited to gather in groups of more than 6 people outside your home. But apparently that wasn't enough. The British Labour Party has spoken in favour of a nationwide quarantine, promising that it will be brief. The justification for it is typical for coronavirus fraudsters: flattening the curve of infections, as if they are really concerned about people's health. But workers already know the real value of the promises given out by capitalist parties and governments, and therefore go out protesting, knowing that nobody but themselves will fight for their rights and freedoms. Spain, Barcelona, October 16th. Workers protesting against coronavirus measures. Thousands of hospitality workers held a demonstration in downtown Barcelona on October 16th, protesting against the closure of bars and restaurants throughout Catalonia for 15 days due to the growing number of infections. After all that we have endured in recent months, this is the final slaughter, said one of the protesters, the owner of a local restaurant. Another protester held a sign that read, "On the verge of extinction." According to the authorities' estimates, the new quarantine will hit 30,000 restaurants, and half of all restaurants will go bankrupt by the end of the year. As a result, the catering market will be vacated. Who will occupy it? Obviously, large corporations specializing in public catering. Such measures of the authorities are very beneficial for them. Is the bourgeois government just lobbying their interests? On October 21st, students protested in Barcelona and other cities of Spain, dissatisfied with the deterioration of the education system caused by the government under the pretext of fighting the pandemic. France, October 17th. A multi-thousand protests of undocumented migrant workers, including those whose labor is shamelessly and impudently used by the state and private capital in the field of the most physically straining and dangerous medical jobs. One of the protesters said, "I live in Saint-Denis, and we have a huge proportion of the population, between 10,000 and 20,000, who are undocumented. They often live in terrible conditions. All these people are deprived of their rights, and they are mercilessly exploited." Demonstrators said that the protests will continue until their demands are met. October 21st, Israeli students plan to hold a demonstration in Gabima Square in Tel Aviv. Students will gather to protest the government's refusal to reduce tuition fees during the coronavirus epidemic. More than half the students are unemployed, and it is very difficult for them to make ends meet. Students also believe that the quality of education they receive through remote learning does not match what they have paid for. We shall state clearly and firmly, it is not acceptable for a Minister of Higher Education to ignore us and remain in his seat, while a large number of students are threatened with economic collapse and the danger of dropping out of school. This is our future, and we will not stop until we fully resolve our issues, said the organizers of the demonstration. Russia. On October 24th, in Krasnoyarsk, citizens will gather to protest against masks and remote learning. The organizers are an initiative group of citizens. The meeting will be held in the style of people's councils. We will meet with citizens who are interested in this topic, discuss problems, solutions, sign a resolution in the end of the meeting, record all the initiatives that citizens have put forward, formalize them legally and send to the authorities. We want to inform the public that all this mandatory mask wearing and remote learning are illegal, say the initiators of the meeting. The city authorities have not yet approved the meeting because they are afraid. They are afraid to refuse and they are afraid to agree. But by law, people's councils do not require approval. If necessary, people will gather without asking anyone, let alone the city administration, the henchmen of capital and the direct organizers of the corona-fascist terror in the city. We hope that the gathering in Krasnoyarsk will take place and residents of Krasnoyarsk will support the initiative. After all, it's the people who need democratic rights and freedoms, not the authorities, for whom democracy is a pain in the neck. And if this happens, following the example of Krasnoyarsk, other cities of Russia will rise in order to fight the coronavirus terror.